carry on.
Yeah.
We are live, by the way. Austin.
Yeah, we are live, Austin.
Nice.
So the thing that we were talking about earlier, don't mention it right now. You know the thing?
Yeah, I know the thing.
Yeah. That's sweet alpha that you shared earlier.
Yeah, this sweet alpha.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sucks, but I knew for certain that I was gonna catch something from ETH Denver, but knock on wood, so far so good.
Yeah.
What we like to hear, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess what was Denver like as a whole? What were some standout moments? You launched Balloon while you were out there, just sort of a review of some of that, whole stuff out there, and then any celeb sightings out there?
No celeb sightings, but it's hard for me to think about people as celebrities in crypto. Like, no one's actually famous, But I think the main event itself was like meh, to be honest. Like, it was too weird for me. It was like people in furry outfits like singing GM to one another, and that's not me. For obvious reasons. But a lot of the side events like Farcaster, the Matcha House, Base, Splits, Privy, a lot of the like-minded folks with at least aligned with native. Those events were pretty dope. To be honest, met a lot of great people. Met some day one native holders. Shout out to you all. And launched Balloon, which I'm really excited to kind of tease more about, and issued some first stamps. So people got stamps for attending the Farcaster event if they met me in person, and the Coinbase developer event that I did on Thursday. People got stamps for attending those, which was pretty cool. And then like you said, I launched Balloon, and like I said, pretty excited to get that information out there. There is a test flight coming very, very soon, and should be pretty cool, pretty dope. It's in testing and review right now. I'm constantly refining it and making it feel good in the hand and things like that. So overall, a really good week. Unfortunately, I didn't get as much done in terms of code and productivity as much like most weeks, but I kind of expected that, right? You go to an event like that and just meet a bunch of people. But playing catch up this week, and so far so good. So
sweet. Yeah, it seems like everything was packed out there. Yeah, it seemed like a lot of the talks were around all of the side events and not so much the main event, which, yeah, I mean, it could be the same way for FarCon, but we'll see. I think FarCon itself as an event is usually pretty awesome. So
yeah, I think FarCon will be different. I think it's much more kind of focused on value, to put it mildly, I think. And someone made the comment, I don't know who it was, but so much of ETH Denver was not even ETH related, right? It was all of these alternative chains, alt L1s, alt L2s, even, a lot of ETH Denver was not ETH related. And I think that showed, you know what I mean? So.
Yeah. Well, I think I'll go for the first time next year, so hoping for a banger.
Kind of what I'm thinking too. We've been kind of not, in attendance there, but as it's becoming more Farcaster heavy, we're really excited. So.
Yeah, I think that's probably right, to be honest. I think it's too early for me to make a call whether or not I'm going to go back. I'd much rather be here working and building, but if there's enough value in it for frankly me personally, then I'll definitely make the trip. And to be clear, this past week was valuable for me. The side events were great, the social capital was great. Meeting a bunch of native holders was awesome. I kind of felt like a mini celebrity most places I went, which was pretty fun. But yeah, I think I would skip the main event. Like a lot of the booths are just noisy or whatever, not relevant. But if you pick the right side events, they're a lot of fun. And Denver's a cool city. I was pretty impressed with Denver. I hadn't spent like an extended amount of time there, but that was a welcome surprise too. Really great food, good coffee. Weather was actually nice. I was expecting it to be like freezing, but it was fairly nice. So had a good time.
Hey, yeah, that's great to hear. We have a mutual friend of ours, me and Austin. His name's Avon. He works for Verse, which is an institution of generative art and just AI art in general. He lives out there and loves the food.
Very cool.
So it's a great spot. But yeah, I guess we should get into going on this. So in terms of last week, if we want to just like kind of recap a little where we were at. So we went through a bunch of questions. I think it was a longer session. It was like 2.5 hours.
Yep.
Where we went through a lot of just like our initial questions around, what we're building, some just general like attributes and impact statements, and then a bunch of questions. So for anybody listening now or in the future, feel free to come through that and give you a little bit of backstory onto where we're coming from today. And yeah, I think, we landed on some goals. So short-term, medium-term, long-term. Short-term is probably the most, I guess, exciting to roll over, and we're going to get into some of that stuff today. But yeah, just feel free to have a look if you have a link to the Figma and dive into session 1 and kind of see what little nuggets of information you can pull out of there. So I guess that kind of kicks off with our session 2. We did some initial brainstorming, just around like where we're at in terms of, native itself. So, native having passports, there's .studio, there will be homes, there will be neighbors. Well, there is neighbors now, technically.
Yep.
And then from passports, you've got stamps and prints. And, maybe this isn't laid out exactly the way that we might picture it, but just trying to get, some marks down on the page. So if there's anything we're missing here, or you think we should add, just in general, as we, continue to build this out throughout the process, just let us know.
Yeah, one important piece that I don't have like a catchy noun for yet, like a proper noun for, and I think I mentioned this maybe in our pre-discovery meeting, the very first meeting, is like dot tokens or city tokens. Dot tokens isn't right, but the like tokens that comprise the native economy are almost like their own kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like Balloon is one of the first things, like coffee and tacos and latte and things like that. Goods or city tokens or whatever. Like native paired tokens. Those are kind of their own thing, and part of the upcoming launch that's imminent is actually enabling neighbors, passport holders to actually start seeding the economy with those tokens. And so that's coming like pretty soon. And another kind of noun that I would consider as a part of this ecosystem, right? So dots can launch them, passport holders can launch them, they pair with native and they're a part of the community. Dots can see them, and trade them, etc.
Right. And then is there a difference between the tokens that the bots launch that are part of native versus the tokens that users bots launch, right? It could even go a little bit further. Yeah,
I mean, fundamentally, no, there's not. Outside of who's receiving the fees. Right. If a dot launches them, then obviously the dot sponsor is getting a cut of those fees. Whereas if a human launches it, the human is getting 100% of the issuer fees. Minus the interface fee, obviously. But
And then it's just something to consider. Obviously, there would be no difference on like Deck Screener or something like that, but
Right,
within the
yeah.
native sphere, the UI might be able to do something like that. So,
Yeah.
Right.
yeah.
Now, I haven't decided yet, but that's an interesting question. Like, maybe I'll make it so that a dot would prefer, like, there's an order of preference. Like, for instance, if I could buy coffee or latte or cappuccino and I want some caffeine as a dot, how do I decide which one? It could be that I would buy my own token first, and then it cascades to buying a passport holder's token, and then it cascades to buying another dots token. Like, there's an order of preference there.
Right.
I don't know if that's right, but there could be something like that. But outside of that, I don't think that there's a fundamental difference.
Totally. Okay. Yeah. Just wanted to touch base on that. So yeah, I mean, this is something that we're going to keep building out as we're going through the process with
Yep.
it, right? Just kind of rethinking about this stuff and remaining connected to it, because it's really the most important piece of the branding and understanding how this is going to interact with one another. So yeah, I mean, we just went through and took some screens of like where the current status of things in, just to take a snapshot of time where we're at, because I know you're building quick and we want to be able to see where we're coming from, what's changing, those sorts of things. We won't do this every week, but it's just nice to pull this stuff and get a snapshot in time of where we're at. I know that a lot of this is built for mobile first, so we probably didn't do you dirty, but did you a little dirty by doing desktop screens. But I mean, everything is there, and I think that there's it's worthwhile to do this and just kind of get an idea for everything that's laid out in the map and what we're seeing. So I mean, as far as this stuff, is there anything that's that we can place in here as well that we might not capture in terms of like a snapshot in time?
I'm trying to think. You got the general thing.
I know one thing that we probably weren't showing here was Dot Studio, and I think that's still probably in flux and not in, GA or public. So it's worth capturing.
It's definitely not GA. It's not even deployed anywhere, even in a testing environment. I mean, is that true? I think that's true. But I could give you some screenshots if you want of both Dot Studio and Dot Spaces. To give you something to work with. I think that would be fine by me. Because
I think we can go pull them from YouTube as well. I know there's a few videos.
That's true. Yep.
During native week, we can pull them from there. I'm guessing they haven't changed a whole ton from then.
They haven't.
Okay.
They haven't. YouTube would be that works totally fine. Right now, most of the dot work, because that's after I get the passport app out, like that is the next big thing. And I've obviously been working on it for 2 months now, and it's pretty cool. I'm not gonna lie, it's pretty cool. It's getting really close to being GA-able, or at least like testable. So right now, like the dot you create, you actually can launch, and then there's like a factory and a coordinator for all of the dots and stuff like that that's happening behind the scenes. And so the next couple of weeks, it's like putting that stuff on chain. Your sponsorship of a dot as an NFT, being able to sponsor the dot, via transactions, and all that kind of stuff is kind of what the next couple of weeks are going to be about. But the UI and kind of the flow is pretty straightforward and set right now.
Rad. That's
at least as an MVP. Yeah.
Yeah, and then I don't know if we've talked about this yet, kind of a few conversations, but I guess what's the rollout to like users for testing, that sort of stuff? How are you thinking about that? Is there going to be like a small access group and that sort of thing? How are you thinking about it?
Yeah, I'm prioritizing native and balloon holders. There's like there's one person on the inner circle that I've worked with for the better part of a decade. He'll get first look, basically as QA, just like another pair of eyes that I trust from a product side. And then after that, we'll probably do a smaller like alpha rollout to balloon and native holders, and then after that it'll be kind of public release.
Sweet. I haven't actually picked up any balloon yet, so I have to go do that before you take a snapshot.
You've got a few hours though.
Okay, after this meeting, I'll make it happen. I've been busy and obviously under the weather a little bit, but I'm like, yeah, I gotta get it going. So.
Yep.
Cool. Well, yeah, I mean, we'll check back on this stuff. We'll probably add in some screenshots of Dot Studio itself, and just as a reference point as we're building, just to keep an eye on everything and how it's growing. So, I mean that leads us to this area over here. I don't know if you want to spotlight me, but I'm just pointing out there's a couple of areas that, if anybody's watching, these are the mood boards that Derek has been creating. One of them is a community one. It's called Native Community. If you want to post anything in there, if you're getting ideas while you're watching this, feel free to just add them there, because nobody has edit access right now to this file other than the three of us. So just post it there, and then we can move it in here, or kind of shout out in the chat if there's anything being populated in there. We just pulled out some selects, so this week is really going over the vision board. So I know that you had done a little bit more building on this and playing around with some more visual themes and ideas. There's some stuff pulled in from last week just to kind of like clarify a few things are on, and just get a general idea of like from last week what you maybe took away from it, what you've been thinking about in terms of visual aesthetic, visual palette, the way these things start to work, and how that played into continuing to select the vision board. Yeah,
for sure. I think, I'm still, from an aesthetic point of view, I remain drawn to the geometric stuff.
Yep.
As you correctly kind of pulled out some of these selects. I also love the idea, we talked about this last time, of like individual components comprising a larger whole, whether that's dots and chips into a circuit board, or subway stations into a metro line, or citizens into a city, right? Like I love that idea. I also like, when I look at something like this, right? It's beautiful, just geometrically, aesthetically. But it's very reminiscent of this.
Totally.
To me.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. Where it's like similar shapes, and then there's like a use of color to highlight the different kind of pieces. I like that. I like the maps of nothing, obviously attracted to this. And then this thing really stood out to me for a couple of reasons. I like the use of complementary, or not complementary, but I forget the term, where they're like opposite colors.
It's slipping off my mind too, just because I'm,
Yeah, but you know what I mean, right? Like, exactly. I like that idea, and the a lot of the line work is also reminiscent of these like little things that I do,
It feels like a ballpoint pen sketch, or like a fine tip felt pen sketch in a lot of ways. And I think that it's the colors that do a lot of it, and it's the single line weight that does a lot of it too.
Yep.
And I was doing some reading about those too, and apparently this artist is a Russian artist, and the name of the series is No Function, Just Form. So it's like just sort of like visualization porn in a lot of ways. Like he's just thinking out the way that stuff could look cool, heads up displays, that kind of thing, how things connect. I don't know. It's really fun to see someone's mind just play with data that isn't there, and just be creative with the forms that we're not used to being seen in a creative way. So,
which honestly, like, at least the first few iterations of native like it's not going to be, and we've talked about this as well. It's not going to be like the full-fledged Sims where you're a 3D character inside of this thing. Like a lot of it is going to be kind of textual or pretty like minimal UI and clicking dots on a map type thing, right? And so no function, just form. That resonates with me. Where like a lot of the visual aesthetic and a lot of the branding is just going to be there for visual interest's sake. You know what I mean? Like it's not meant to carry or commute any data necessarily. There will be places for that, obviously, right? But I'm thinking like dot profile pictures, things like that, right? It's purely there for kind of ambiance and aesthetic reasons.
Totally. Yeah, I'm kind of thinking about that too. Like if you hover over a dot, there's like a random like oscillator or like it's going from sine wave to like sawtooth wave, and you're like, what does it do? Like, what does this mean? But it's just this fun UI element that doesn't really mean anything, but maybe is tied to like transactions that day or something like that, where it's not clear what it means.
Well, I mean, that's also evocative of prints, right? Like the prints, being tied to your on-chain activity and being generated from that, and like there is a rhyme and a reason, but unless you actually wrote the code to generate prints, you don't know what that rhyme or reason is. Like there's a couple of layers in there that basically just use your on-chain activity as seeds. So it's not like the more activity you do, the more complex or the better your print. It's like it's fairly generative and random, which I think is kind of a fun element. But
yeah, and it's funny. There's a lot of red and blue, here. Just by way of how it worked out, red, blue, and black, which I find interesting. Not to say that we would run forward with just those colors, but it probably is worth exploring.
I think it is, honestly, and I've said multiple times I'm not super attached to the green for a variety of reasons, both aesthetic and brand, but color is certainly on the table here. I would be curious if there's anybody watching that's like super in love with the green, like what your defense of it would be. But for me, I think heading into this conversation from zero principles, if everything's on the table, right? That would certainly include the color. And you're right. Like I didn't even think about the color schemes that I've kind of picked here. I do gravitate personally towards like black and white stuff, monochromatic type stuff. But you're right, there is a lot of red and blue here.
I feel like that's right though, gravitating to black and white, because I feel like a large aspect of it is going to be a lot of shades of gray, and whether that's made in dithering or halftones or what have you, right? It's going to be a lot of that, because it's going to be a lot of busyness, and you're going to have to use color in ways that are very poignant and important, I think. And obviously you could switch modes and stuff, but I don't know if you guys have seen these like stamps or whatever. Obviously they're on the passport page, but I wanted to highlight this as well. This is kind of as out there as I get on color. So I'm posting a lot of lore to Zora. So like I'm releasing some of the neighborhoods, like Diffie Grove, for instance. All of the neighborhoods are named after a famous like technologist, and then there's like a little description for the neighborhood. As of right now, the colors are actually tied to their district. So like neighborhoods within the same district have a similar color palette. Right. Okay. Yeah, that's really neat. And are the colors selected by you, or by like if you're running through AI, or is it off of like a map of the coordinates, or? No, it's by me. It's fairly arbitrary, also on the table. Yeah. So. Okay. Yeah. No. I think the colors are doing a great job for what they're doing now. That's for sure. Interesting thing about the red and blue too, before we move on, it would be really crazy, and this is just like one of those stupid spitball ideas, but like if somehow you could put on 3D glasses and do the whole like red and blue glasses thing.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
It's like a secret Easter egg, but yeah. And then yeah, I mean, I guess seeing some more of the gestural dot space stuff, that sort of almost look like sigils, the Pablo Picasso spatial drawings, is really nice. And I think there's an element of like precision and imprecision and human touch that needs to be met here in a lot of ways, because when you go too precise, you get this uncanny valley feeling, right? And since this thing is going to be, a lot of, obviously agents interacting, there needs to be some sort of human variance, I think, within the style potentially. And I don't know what that looks like yet, but it's something that I keep coming back to in terms of a theme.
Yeah, I think that's right too. And I think of native, really as like man and machine in this dance together. It just so happens to be an economic dance within the city of Native, right? Like dots are carrying some lift, but so are people. And you're right. Like even looking at the Picasso constellation, I know they're constellation drawings or whatever, but like I can't help but see, almost like characters, like alphabet characters here. Like this is an S type thing. This is obviously an O, a T, things like that, like popping out for me. And so it is kind of, mechanical with that human element. I think that's really important as well. Brian says, big fan of the native green. Been waiting to be subscribed for 5 minutes before able to type. Yeah. Thanks for that, Brian. I think maybe there is a way to make the green work, but I also think that people would be just as attached to whatever other color scheme we come up with as well.
Yeah, there could be a couple modes too. As well, in different areas that you can switch in and out of. If we have like a light mode, dark mode, or like a native original recipe, something like that.
Brian says that the word native represents, like it evokes birth and life, like where you're from, like origin, and green is a color representing that growth to him, which is interesting.
Yeah.
To be blunt, the reason that green is the original color, because I don't normally gravitate towards a lot of green, but the reason the green is there is because there's a significant kind of vacuum in network colors, right? So Facebook owns blue, right? Mm-hmm. Twitter has like the monochromatic. Snapchat is yellow. Twitch, Farcaster, purple. The last big green network was maybe Vine, or if you consider Cash App green, like a network. But I think there was like open space there. That was just like the thinking. It wasn't too deep, to be honest. But.
Yeah, no, I mean that makes sense, and I think there's a shout that we could really have the colors be a little bit more open in the way that they're implemented. I think we're going to get into some of that stuff as we move through it, because the way I feel in like talking to a number of designers who are working on Farcaster projects and Web3 projects, we just constantly see this like need for organic brand generation and regeneration. Mm-hmm. And what that means to us is like consistently changing tertiary and variant logos, and changing things around to keep things fresh, right? Almost the way that developers do feature releases and tweaks and bug fixes. Like we want to start pushing for that as well on the design sense of things, because you see a lot of brands doing that. I mean, you see somebody like an Adidas or a Nike, and the amount of like different campaigns they've run over the last 30, 40 years and the breadth of them in different countries and what that means, and every exploration they've had out there. makes them who they are. So yeah, I mean, I think that branding being a consistent process to a degree, obviously, like there's going to be checkpoints and places you can hang your hat up on, but I think it's worth, changing things and having, and maybe even like user generated stuff organically as well, influence the way that a brand direction takes place. So yeah, just some general thoughts on that, but
Yeah, I think so too. And I don't think, I'm not attached to color as like the defining feature of a brand, any brand really. But, there are a couple of exceptions, like Snapchat's yellow is pretty iconic. But, for native in particular, I think even down to like the prints, and you could choose your own color scheme, the neighborhoods are different colors, like things like that. I think being able to interchange that out is pretty straightforward. And then, but I do see like the shape system that we come up with. Obviously type, because it's a very product forward kind of world. Those are going to have, I bet, a higher weight than color. But
totally, yeah. And then there's a bunch of other things that I want to ask about when we get to the next section here in a minute. But yeah, I guess, is there anything to be said about the logos that we talked about last week, other than the fact that Claude is good? We like it because it's like this fun little talking asterisk. And then I'm guessing this was the NASA logo, right? The Slinky logo.
I mean, honestly, I like all of what NASA does. I don't. The worm logo is iconic, obviously, but even their newer stuff. I usually have something NASA around me. My hat is on the rack outside, but all of their stuff is pretty iconic to me, anyway. I'm not answering financial questions during this chat. This is the right worm logo. The OpenAI logo didn't come through, but
so what I wanted to do is, if you can click that link.
Yeah.
Barely there. This is from their brand docs, right? And if we can somehow maybe get it on the screen, I'm not sure if that's possible. But,
yeah, we can.
So I know you said sans the logo because you weren't so thrilled on how that turned out, but like this video, I think does a really good job of. We don't have to, we can keep this down, but
yep.
I think that they do a really good job of sharing their vision for what this brand should be and how to like build within it through this one video. It's really fantastic.
Yeah, I would agree. And it struck me as dot coded for sure. Very similar styles. I'm not in love with their font, but that's beside the point. I do think that it does a good job of imputing the brand. And I like the marks, the use of dots, the use of circles. I do like. I also like that they cleaned up their logo. The logo before was a little haphazard, to put it mildly. It seems like
it was.
Someone built it in an hour or whatever.
Needed some elbow grease.
Yeah. That use of color was great, by the way, where they had like a standard kind of palette, like the navies and the light blue with an accent gold, but then they like expanded that to all kinds of colors.
In between that are harmonized with it.
Yep. I do like this idea. It's not right for native by any means, but the utilization of kind of natural photography
totally
is interesting, which actually dovetails with the coming app. Part of the CTA for the coming app is like tokenize your world, because you'll be able to, and this is alpha for anyone listening, but from the app you'll be able to launch a token paired with native, and all of the dots will be able to see that, right? And so the idea is you take a picture of something in your life, right? Like ramen, or you're out with friends or whatever. And now all of a sudden you just created a digital version of that thing in the city of native. So like over time, we're tokenizing the real world as native, like we're duplicating it as a simulation for dots. And obviously it's a clanker. You would get the fees for that thing, like as dots pick it up, etc. So that's actually how Balloon was launched. I uploaded a picture from my phone into the Passport app, launched a token called Balloon, and here we are. There's use cases for it later, but it's going to be pretty sick. So the idea is, like, if you're a Passport holder, you are actually helping to make a fully tokenized version of the real world. And you do that by going about your life and then using your phone to tokenize what's around you.
Derek, I wanted to get up out of my chair and just like smash something. I mean, that is so huge. It's crazy. I mean, and I'm guessing to a degree, and I don't know if you probably considered this, like, but it could use, like, if it's running through, the image is running through some sort of agent or AI, right? Like, it could come up with names for the token, potentially, right? And then it's like name, symbol, image that Clanker does, but all in one button, maybe, if you like the first name and ticker right off the bat.
I'll probably build that today, actually. That's a good idea.
Hell yeah.
I can't help but to think that it reminds me of when I was younger. I had this like little toy called Scanners, I believe is what it was called, and I would go to the grocery store with like my mom and my dad, and I could scan the barcodes on like.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
Have like a generative monster essentially by the UPC code, and it was just like you're kind of doing that whole, like, obviously not to the same degree of tokenizing, but realizing something in the real world to a digital. Digital artifact of it.
Yep. Cool. Yep. That's exactly right. So I might be able to show that here.
Are our talking heads on the video?
Yeah.
Nice. Okay.
Let's see here.
Oh man. This is wild. This is kooky wacky.
Yeah, I know. Let me see here. I've got to hard code it real quick since we're on desktop.
Good. Let's see if there's anything else coming through the chat. I'll try to.
Yeah, you'll see something like this. The picture that you just took. So you use your phone camera. The picture that you just took will be here, and then you can put in whatever name and ticker you want. Yep. Pair it with native as the default. Obviously, if you wanted to launch a ETH token or whatever, you can. I gotta fix that bug, but pairs with native, and then you just launch it, and it's launched to all the dots. All the dots can see it. It's a clanker, so you get the fees, etc. And building an additional utility kind of around that feature. But the idea, like I said, is that you start to build a tokenized version of the world that we all live in.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is just crazy. I mean, with the rise of like coins and what Zora's doing recently, and then clankers, and then you building on this model, it's just like, I'm sure someone out there is doing a think piece on like how all this stuff fit together, it's just happening so fast. It's amazing.
Yeah, I've talked about it before, kind of. If you read between the lines, I'll say something like, the coffee we drink, you and I have taste buds so we can taste it and consume it, but what does the tokenized version of that look like? Well, it's an ERC20 for dots to consume. The homes that we own, the cars that we own, etc., those are NFTs. Like, your car is not like my car. Our homes are different, etc. But if I go get 2 cups of black coffee from Dunkin', those are interchangeable, so those are tokens, right? Like, when you start to think about the technology that exists and like real world assets, right? Like you start to look at the world differently. That everything could be simulated as a token. Now I could do that. I could sit here and like tell Claude or OpenAI or whoever to like generate a list of 1,000 nouns, and then I write a script to go and then like tokenize each of those things. But I think it's better if I let passport holders do it and like decentralize that. I also think it's like it'll be way more interesting because hopefully it's going to be reminiscent of like your daily life, and so a little bit more true to form, if you will. And so I think that'll be more interesting as a simulation, as a game. It'll be more interesting to us. It'll be more interesting to Dots.
Yeah, no. I mean, it's like, what would you take with you on vacation? What would you take with you on a desert island? But it's not. It's native. And then, interesting thing about coffee is I realized that there's probably going to be like 70 different tickers for coffee, right? Off the rip, but that the dots will choose which flavor they like based on the contract address, and that'll be like their brand name is the contract address.
Yeah, I mean, and that actually dovetails. There's a comment in the chat again from Brian, kind of on topic, not to rush to address a need I'm seeing across the space is grouping of tokens with similar purposes. How does one discover coffee versus latte versus cappuccino versus water? What if there will be? Ozon asks, what if there will be more than one latte token created? So that's part of what I'm building, guys, is like once a ticker launches, that ticker cannot be duplicated. So that is not true of the Clankerverse at large. It's certainly not true of the chain at large. It is true in native. So if someone has launched coffee, you cannot then go launch coffee. Technically you can, but Dots won't see it, right? So I limit like the dot context to only unique tokens. And then like Dan was saying, like it's up to the dot on whether or not the dot buys $latte or $coffee or $coffee with cream or $cappuccino or $flat white, right? It's up to the dot. And by extension, that means it's up to you, right? So part of the lore, like in dot spaces, you could give it like a short-term memory piece or a long-term memory piece that like we only drink flat whites, right? And so you would actually influence your dot in terms of like what it's buying and consuming, and you could actually change the market in that way, right? And so that's part of the game mechanics, if you will, is actually influencing your dots to influence markets, right?
I guess one thing I was curious about, can dots, I guess, ever forget things, in the sense that can we delete memories from these dots, or maybe would we have to instill a new memory that's like you burned yourself with coffee and now you're a tea person, or not?
Yeah,
you still can burn yourself, but you know what I mean. Like, curious.
Yeah, so the short answer is yes, you can delete memories from dots. You kind of have control. There's a base prompting system for every dot. So every dot shares some base logic, right? Very similar to how if you live in North America, certainly Canada and the US, like we share a shared culture, right? Certain norms, holidays, things like that. That's kind of the base prompting. But then you and I are very different, right? Not just based on where we grew up and where we live and who raised us and things like that, but just our personal tastes and interests and things like that. That kind of thing is up to the individual dot sponsor to kind of influence. Question in the chat, what about Cough33? You could launch that ticker, but remember, dots speak English. So they're not going to necessarily be looking for like leet speak, as the token. So you could launch that ticker, but is it going to do well in the markets? Probably not, compared to coffee.
Interesting. Yeah. No, I think that's a great wrinkle to this whole thing, because it basically, hopefully, will allow for like an acceleration in world creation by the users, right? Because like you need to think of something new. and keep pushing. So
that's exactly right, and that's the reason. Again, I'm very intentional with the rolling out of this thing. That's the reason I launched Passports first. The Passport app is launching before Dots, and then Dots, right? Because I want the world seeded with some data when Dots come into being, right? And so that's like super important here, to give Dots a little bit more context than just what I can provide. So obviously I'm going to fill in gaps, right? Things like that, but that's kind of the intention here. The point behind it all.
Yeah. No, I mean, that makes sense. What do we got? Some notes from Austin. That's good. Brian's here. Nice. Hey, Brian. If you're still here, what up? What else do we have here? Yeah, so we can get down into this lower section. I think starting at the top left, and just talking about textures, patterns, things that we like, things that we don't like, sort of controlled human error in some aspects, because, do we like dithering? Do we like halftones? I'm guessing probably halftones are something that we want to lean towards, but dithering could be cool in some instances too, because, halftones are basically just dots.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, just getting an idea for if we're going to use that as shading, time of day, heat maps, these sorts of things, visual elements. I mean, dots are being used currently in the design system that you're developing, as backgrounds and little elements across different components. But, what does that evolve to and what does that look like? So, I mean, are you partial to, halftones, dithering? Anybody in the chat have, a preference on either of those? And just, starting to think about these elements and basically building a visual palette of things that we're going to draw from to build the brand.
Yeah, I mean, and I'd be curious what people in the chat think about, this kind of stylized dithering / halftone type piece. I like the more traditional style a lot better. Less I like halftones and dithering when they're signal, not when they're just random noise, if that makes sense, right?
So the one right above, I think it's number 3, let's say, on that board, there's there's an organized pattern to it that feels it could be nice in some shape or form, right?
I like these less, right?
Yeah, the ones that are just noise gradient. Yeah.
Yep, I like these less. Out of these, I wish these were more formed.
Yeah.
More circular.
Yeah, this is sort of from an older computer software book. So.
Yeah, for sure. I like the direction. I really I could see this being much more kind of helpful and clean as a design element. I'm less interested in the noise piece, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah. It was just more what we're feeling in terms of direction, and when we talk about gradients and the way that colors intermingle and these sorts of things, what are we going to be moving forward with in general? So I think that's a great summation of organized dithering and halftones. Just the basically run-of-the-mill halftones are the best way to go. And then, so these pieces up top, basically just thinking about different ways that, native could be visualized. Obviously, this is just a straight up, easy grid of elements, but it brings up, a question, which I don't know, you probably answered it, but I think it's important to understand, what the field of view and the camera focus on what native looks like is. Like, is it what we're seeing on native? Is it going to be more top down? Is it going to be, are you going to have the ability to zoom in and zoom out? Because all of those things start to change, at least at first, the branding and the general direction that we're going to go in, right? If you can change camera angle, you can zoom in, zoom out, then there's a possibility for more play,
Yeah. So the short answer is yes. Like, I do imagine pan zoom being a thing. Again, just like Google Maps, right? There's going to be like a standardized field of view, probably isometric, maybe top down. That's not set in stone. I've always thought about it as isometric, but top down would be a lot easier, to be honest. Isometric math is not easy.
Proof of concept.
Yeah. But pan zoom certainly on the board. Tilt probably less so. At least to begin with, right? Eventually, maybe you do want to toggle between top down and isometric or something like that. I don't know, but and the marks I left here, by the way, Austin. The difference between these two is like very similar to the difference between these two to me, right? It's like this is much more organized, higher signal, more clarity. And this is like noise to me. That's how I read it anyway. So
more structure over chaos, kind of.
Yeah, exactly.
Seeing an X over Veramona is where it kind of breaks my heart, I'll say, but we don't have to.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think with the Veramona work, like, what I like about that one is the top, where it's like just a little bit off kilter. Just a little bit not perfect. And I think that there's something to be said about having a little bit. I know that like designing planned imperfection into a system is a little bit difficult or can be challenging. But I think there's something to be said about at least thinking about it and trying to see if there's something there, right?
Yeah, I think there's something there. Like if you think about cities, right?
Yeah.
Like you have, the grid of Manhattan, for instance. Right, like it is imperfect but structured, and the imperfections were not planned; they were organic. And I think that's like this to me. The top piece here, that does strike me as planned imperfection.
Yeah.
Versus like if they weren't all squares, or if they were like not quite squares, but they fit together cleanly.
Yeah.
Like that's, instead of overlapping here.
Right. If it was like a trapezoidal shape.
Correct.
Just cleanly fit on,
Right. Like that's how a lot of cities start to like take structures. Like they all fit in their own places. There's not like overlap or whatever, but they are imperfect, right? So, you could use Veramona as, this piece in particular as an analog for Manhattan, right? Where like Upper East, Upper West, Midtown, it's very like grid-like, right? But then as you get more and more to Soho and FiDi, like you start to leave the grid a little bit, and by the time you're at the tip, like in FiDi or Old Manhattan or whatever, it's just a complete mess. Like,
totally.
I could see that, but I would represent it a little bit. Not that I'm a better artist than Vera, obviously, but I would represent it a little bit different.
Totally, yeah. And I mean, I think that idea. I mean, because it's the way that like cellular structures and plants are organized too, right? And it's like, yeah. I mean, in a lot of cities, like they weren't, at least in America, early ones weren't designed on a grid, but they were more so designed by like the farmers taking their cows out to pasture. That's what designed the roads. So, yeah, I don't know. There's something to be said about that character, which I guess that's another flavor of what we could think about, and what that means.
I pulled in a picture over here where I found a little empty space, but it reminds me of like the walls of like Peru.
This?
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how they all just kind of like fit in almost perfectly.
Yep, I like that a lot. And that, like, when I think, I haven't designed a map of native yet, but like that's how I think about the neighborhoods, right? They're not like structurally, regular polygons or whatever, but they are, they fit together very similar to this, right? I like that. Hardcore Casual, great name. Late comment, but halftone dots are a cool design language element for this because up close they are dots, but when you zoom out, you see how all the dots work together to create a bigger picture. Yep, agreed.
Yeah.
Like almost using dots as kind of like pixels. That's a theme that's come up already today, but in past meetings as well, like these individual things making up a whole. Thanks for your comment, by the way.
Yeah, that was a great comment, and that's something that we've talked about internally too. And I don't know if we've talked with you about it yet, but I guess it would depend on zoom level. But like, what do these dots look like at scale? Is it look like a fog of little pixels, moving around, or is it more so like big circles or like target size circles?
No idea.
It's something that we can decide, right? Like that's what we're here to do, and it's a lot of fun to think about. And are they bound to the street? Can they just like float in the middle of the air on the street and whatever?
Yep.
It's a really interesting thing to think about, and yeah, I think it'll start to push through the fog as we go through the process.
100%. Zoomeriste. Are neighborhoods fixed size or expanding as needed to scale with population? And that's dovetails with the question Dan just asked. The way I think about native right now is it's 80% AI, 80% dots to 20% humans, and I'm targeting an initial population of 100,000 at scale. So native will be roughly 80,000 dots supporting 20,000 passport holders. To give you guys an idea of where we are right now, we're just under 1,000 passport holders. There's about 800 passport holders. So we've got a ways to go to expand. But at the 100,000 mark, I will know that this is working. It's not just hype. It's not just kind of people bandwagoning a token. It's like, no, there's utility here. And then there's neighborhoods within native that have fixed sizes to support up to 100,000 people. That's how I'm thinking about it right now. Once native hits 100,000 citizens, that's when I begin thinking about, okay, like native is the first city, not the only. Should we expand native or launch a second city altogether?
Yep. So I think just in general, modular and what Kabuzi is doing there, I think is a really interesting thing. I think that talking about, the base unit of measure in native, what is it? Is it its own system of measurement? Like, how are these things constructed? Because then you start to think about, just general sizing of things and what those are in relation to dots. And there's just an interesting thought experiment here that we're going to be doing as we're working through this, just to make sure that we're exploring all the options. It's something fun just to think about. What is the unit of measure? So just thinking about the way that like buildings are and neighborhoods and stretches of street and possible like areas for parks and public spaces, that all that stuff. I don't know. I don't know if you have any thoughts there. If that sparks anything for you.
It does. I mean, it's a large, world building is actually a large part of brand building when you're talking about native. Like, and I've gone back and forth on whether or not like in native canon or whatever, like do dots have physical forms? Increasingly, like my answer is no, and I want to lean into like the digital-ness of them. Maybe that's a mistake, maybe not. but like questions like how many fingers does a dot have? As many as it wants. Like because like from a transactional perspective, like when you think about the simulator, the economy, etc., like dots can essentially teleport. Like it could be in a coffee house right now and then co-working within a second. You know what I mean? Like,
right. Yeah, I mean the amount of things that Ghost in the Shell anime, where it's like a human typing on the keyboard, and then it splits into like 20 different.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. That said, I do think that I've had to make decisions around time. So I'm building like a global service that handles things like, I think we talked about this last time, but it handles things like weather events, did a terrorist attack native, like things like that are random. And kind of impact the city and the economy. Like, and so in order to do that, you have to have some like measurements of time, like what time zone is the city of native in, etc. But I haven't thought about like physical forms or whatever, right? It could be interesting to explore like what a digital world's measurement system is.
Yeah, no, it was just something that came up when I was looking at stuff, and I was like, "This is interesting." Like what is a dot measured by? Then
Yep.
how does that change the way that the possible world is shaped? These sorts of things, can infer on the design a little bit in ways. So,
yep. Stuart Reed says the dithering options remind me of Mech's graphic font. Michael Mekasa, I think his name is. He's a pixel artist, has a pro design studio. He has CC0 fonts.
Yeah. I pulled those up. I've got some hot links if you want to spotlight me. Otherwise, if you're already there Googling it, you could probably see it. So this is what he released on Object, and then the other one's just a tweet kind of showcasing some of his stuff. But yeah, I believe this is who that they're talking about here.
Yeah, this is Mech. He runs a couple of, it's the Old Masters and Masters channel on Warpcast. They're both like art-based channels, but yeah, he's like a big pixel artist and like sort of like retro leading artist, and I love his works for sure.
Yeah, good
Very
show.
Cool. Yeah, so I guess the other thing being, you just start to think about, the patterns and these sorts of things that will be part of it, because that plays into branding. And, you think about like architects' patterns, right? Like when they're trying to denote stone versus grass versus water, right? Like these sorts of things, how do they, all kind of line up, and how can we start to use those and pull on those? Potentially, like obviously not these exact ones, but like our own versions of them. And is that something worth playing with, to a degree? So,
yeah, I think it would be. Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out, because I want to stay away from pixel art.
Yeah.
Like the 8-bit kind of, style or whatever. But at the same time, like stuff like this is very interesting as a visual aesthetic. So like, how do you ride that line? Like the dithering versus the pixel fonts from Mech. Like, I'm not in love with pixel fonts for native. I actually like pixel fonts a lot, but for native, they're less interesting. But yeah, Ozan kind of hit on part of my thoughts. He says too much pixel art in crypto. Like, it's almost cliche at this point.
Yeah, unless you're putting a new flavor on it, But
yeah, there's probably a smart way to do it, but I don't want another, like, as much as I love, like, Chrono Trigger or whatever. Like, I don't want another Chrono Trigger clone or whatever.
That makes sense.
I was curious about the and this might be a little too soon to tell, but in terms of like the city, will it be dynamically growing to the I guess like dynamically not expanding, but like new buildings will pop up per how many passport holders are there? Or because I think like if we go with like a basic isometric view, we'll probably always have the same building, right? But it's like
Yep. So the way I'm thinking about that is actually like some of the city will be closed off initially. So think like fog of war type deal. So initially, like, maybe there's only 3 neighborhoods available to buy homes in, etc. to begin with, right? And then as the passport holders grow, the population grows, and we start to open up new neighborhoods at different thresholds. That's how I'm thinking about it right now. So it's not that the buildings dynamically load in or whatever. It's that new neighborhoods open up, but they're fixed.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, there's some stuff on the bottom. Just thinking about like map of the brain. Sort of like galaxy maps, and Austin put an EVE Online map, which is a fun one too. Austin, I don't know if you want to describe any of this, but I think it's generally just like the colors, the way that the stuff connects, and like this might not necessarily be direct inspiration for anything that will happen, but to see the way that organic networks form, at scale. Is a really interesting thing, and then also just like the similarity in colors in a lot of these types of things, I think is a really interesting thing as well. Yeah, go ahead, Austin, if you have a few notes there.
No, you pretty much hit the nail on the head there. That it's just like it's about kind of seeing how these work at scale and how they're all interconnected, and potentially, like you said, how color might interact with transactions or these 2 nodes connecting and stuff like that. So just something to consider. Because I can't help but to think of circuit boards and brains and every network like that kind of operating the same. When we were talking about topology maps and stuff like that, it is reminiscent of a sky map of EVE Online with all their like different like nullsec areas.
Hello? Did we lose you?
Oh, you got you now.
Okay.
You skipped out for a minute.
Yeah.
Did I? Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So I think I see the like similarity between all of these. One of the most fascinating things to me, the brain less so, just because it's so efficient in terms of use of space. But whether it's EVE Online, this star map doesn't quite show it, but like the brain cell universe, like this also looks, by the way, like when you're flying at night, it kind of looks like cities, roads, right? The fascinating thing to me in all of that is the empty space. Like each of them have like wide swaths of empty space. Our universe does as well. Like I forget what it's called. There's like a term for it. Maybe somebody in the chat can help me out. But like, there's like this spot in the universe that is like literally, maybe it's even called the void or something like that. But it's like nothing is there. Like millions of times of our galaxy, and there's just nothing there. And it's not dark matter, but it's like there's just nothing there. There's no stars, there's no like anything like that. And it's like very reminiscent of like not this space, but like this, is it the Butis Void?
It's interesting because I mean, yeah,
it's the mysterious hole in our universe. Spans an area of 330 million light years across. It's the largest void in the known universe. Yeah, it's negative space in design language, but I think it's like super fascinating to me. And And like what that means in a city is something like parks, right? Like Manhattan, the island of Manhattan has a giant negative space, like void called Central Park, right in the middle. That's still like very meaningful. You know, and like what does that mean in the city of Native, in the context of Native? Like what does negative space or empty space mean?
Right. Is everything habitable space, or is there obstructions? Like,
right. I mean, even the very first, you know, the mini map, for instance.
Yeah.
Who is this guy? I don't have premium on the Native account, but this guy's hilarious. All right. Like even the very first mini map had negative space built in, right? Like I put parks in on purpose. So like I think that's an important piece. And what does it look like for a dot to relax, right? How do you visually represent that? Like does something happen to the profile picture or whatever? What does it look like for a human in the city of Native to relax? Yeah, exactly. Hardcore, like dot green spaces. I think that's pretty cool to think about. Even in this superorganism, which I think is a really cool analogy for dots, by the way, but like, you know, there's like emptier spaces here and more dense spaces, which is pretty cool to think about.
Yeah, I mean, like fish and ants and birds and a lot of the stuff that you see in like the really big drone shots at the beginning of you know, Planet Earth or something like that.
Yep.
There's something so neat and organic about that, and I think that the system that you're building has the ability to show these sort of like really neat, you know, sort of like fluid dynamic, versions of dots just moving around and doing stuff, but in a way that doesn't look, you know, obviously threatening or like a swarm of drones or something like that. But I think there's a way to thread the needle on it. Yeah,
it's funny you say that because I can't look at something like this and not think about Michael Crichton's Prey. I don't know if you guys have read that book, but it's crazy to think about. The guy was 15 years ahead of his time. But like, yeah, I love autoglyphs, by the way. Like it's just something so clean to me and geometric, and I hadn't seen these. These are pretty cool.
FX Hash by an artist called Heavy. And yeah, I mean, this is a fun one. We should probably put a link to it.
Okay. Yeah.
These are all generative, so. And then Hash Cities by Yazid it's just another fun one, you know, since we were talking about like hashes, and I think there's daytime and nighttime, and every year on New Year's there's fireworks when you go view your piece. So like I don't know, just those little details that are interesting and fun, and it's like, you know, can you show a city with dots in a way that is horizontal like this? Yeah, you could, you know, if that's what you wanted to do, like one long series of streets, but there's something interesting, you know, between the way that you're showing it now, Heavy here, and then like, you know, sort of the side view.
Yep.
And then some of the ones above, right, where like you've got other generative artists like Andreas Geisen doing like this orthographic sort of shadows-based thing. You know, Smooth Steps, which is on the left-hand side. Yeah, you got Non-Figurative, who's doing like these, what are they, CPU cities, Austin, or?
Generative PCBs is the name that he's going off of right now. It's not a released collection yet.
Which one is that?
WIP shots of it, yeah.
This?
Yeah,
those are really cool.
Yeah,
I like that a lot, actually. Something that we haven't talked about from a aesthetic / like just a brand noun type thing. I love skylines. Like, they're so iconic, you know? Like, we just
feel free to drop anything in here. Yeah, I mean, like, what is this, right? And then you throw this into Native, and there's like elements that become like the skyline of that city, and those go on the passport. Right.
Like you could have like landmarks that represent different neighborhoods. Like just come up with random stuff, right? Like what, you know, what's a cool landmark for, I don't know, Burners, the neighborhood in Native, or, you know, Diffie Grove or Armstrong Hill, or, whatever, like, what does a downtown skyline look like for native, etc. I think that's kind of a cool.
Especially if like you can't tilt the orthogonal or isometric view of native, and if you kind of give people the opportunity to view it as a portrait or as a skyline or something like that, it's a nice touch.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
And it's like easily recognizable, right? Like immediately, if somebody sees the monument in Washington with Capitol Hill, or the Batman building here in Nashville, or the St. Louis Arch, or Seattle Space Needle, or whatever, like you can
the lack of skyline that Boston has.
Yeah, exactly. Boston, lame. Like you can very quickly like recognize a lot of cities just based off of skyline, which is cool.
Yeah.
I like this a lot, by the way.
Yeah, definitely check that out when you have a chance.
Yeah.
The tweet is linked in that card, kind of super.
Okay, cool.
I like terribly want to invert that photo just to see what it looks like when it's white with black lines.
Oh yeah.
I'm gonna have to do that after the call just to see.
Yeah.
I bet it's very reminiscent of that screenshot I shared.
Yeah, it definitely will be with like a little bit more shading.
Yep.
Yeah. And this is actually, if you visit that page, you can see it. It's more of like a video. Like he's doing like animations on the art. So it's really interesting to.
Yeah. This is I wonder if it's in this one, but like you can kind of see some like glowing and passing, and it's.
Yep.
This feels native coded.
Yeah, it's very native coded.
Right.
100% it's native coded.
Shout out Austin. That was a nice pull in the last minute. We were pulling in like some last minute stuff, and we were like, what was that one? And Austin's like, oh, Bjorn. Yeah. Shut up, Bjorn.
Shut up, Bjorn.
Yeah, some of this stuff is just like, I don't know, I was going some wild places, but like just thinking about like habit pathways and like, if there's a grid and then people just forge their own pathway because it's a shorter path to a main street.
Yeah.
How does that not only, maybe it doesn't change inside of what native is, but like how does that maybe inform the branding? Just adding this fingerprint of humans to this, what could be almost too perfect version of native I just want to keep bringing that theme back in, so that we don't get too far from it. And that's really all this stuff is here.
Honestly, it's the habit pathway for native is like we could build this brand and design this whole thing, this cool world, etc. People are going to come to native to make money.
Yeah.
Right? And like, we could the analog is we could design all the cool sidewalks, all the cool monuments, the cool skyline, the cool brand, blah, blah, blah. But like the habit pathway is they want to launch tokens, they want to make money, they want to sponsor dots in order to make money. And everything else is just like icing on that. And so like in the back of our minds as we're building this brand, I think keeping that like economic side of things, not necessarily forefront, right? Like this is not an exchange or anything, like, not building like a DeFi platform, but to ignore the economic side, I think would do citizens and neighbors in native an injustice.
Yeah, it's got to be first and foremost what people are there to do. It's a platform built on tokens.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
So, yeah. Some of these are just these are just kind of placeholders for me. Like, what does it mean? Like, can dots collide? Like, can dots actually collide? Like, are they in a swarm? Do they move around each other? What size are they? Like, these sorts of things. Just thinking about that. So, I think that might wrap everything up.
This is cool.
That's David Dope as well. He does some really amazing work with shaders, and especially in like a more halftone setting. So shout out David. And then of course, if you're not familiar, over here is RimWorld. I know that we're always talking about like resource management and kind of operating, things like that. I think there's a big kind of similarity to what you're building, and I really always kind of see native as like like you mentioned, like it's a game, but it's like an economic simulator in the same capacity. It's like so it's cool what RimWorld also does. I think if anybody has never played it, that you can manage and maintain like a couple individual people, and you can see their like how they interact with people. There's like conversations that they have that are quite humorous, and it's just all generative. So yeah.
Yep. Zimmeriste asks, do places have fixed locations? And do dots do as well at any given moment? That is, if you refresh the page, you should get the same exact display. For places, I think the answer is yes. For dots, that's where we were talking earlier about the physicality of dots, right? Should dots be able to teleport from one location to another? I don't have an answer to that yet. I don't really know. Like, on one hand, they're eating pizza, they're co-working, they're grabbing coffee, they're drinking beer, whatever. So on one hand, like, they are kind of physical analogs to humans, right? There is kind of a analog there. But on the other hand, like, if you and I are in native, we can teleport, right? Like, we can just like pan the map over and be in another location. Like, is that an advantage that we should have that dots don't? Yeah, I don't know. The way I've thought about it to date is that yes, they do have kind of fixed physicality, and literally move on the map, and you can see them move, right? But I don't know yet.
Yeah, I was always thinking of dots in terms of they were interacting with people or other dots on there, that you would potentially see that link happening, and maybe they would be in the middle, or like somehow another dot would like travel on that line to, like, in the same sense that like you're interacting with a transaction, right? You're signing, it's processing, and then it finally gets finished and delivered. But it's hard to maybe plan for that whole sequence in like UI. I mean, base is only getting faster and faster, so you're gonna just see them kind of teleport across the screen. So yeah, I think that's me for the most part.
Yeah, I see it in a way of like they move, but they move. There's two different ways I think about it. They move sort of like slowly in a way that's like relaxing to watch, because I think that like being able to sit and watch and relax is kind of a nice thing. Because if it's too frantic, it might be a little bit uneasy.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if you've got these things teleporting everywhere quickly, it would basically be like blinking, changing swarms of things everywhere, right? And I think you could do it if you like really work on like animation and like how they fade into a location and fade out. That could be really interesting too. And then maybe that isn't as jarring and like seizure inducing. So, like, I'm thinking about it right now, but yeah.
Yeah, I think this is kind of what you're seeing on screen is kind of the way I've thought about them, to date. But yeah, you're exactly right. Like, maybe they do or can teleport, but there's like a transition period where they like stop and maybe glow or blink, or they have some status like about to move to X location or whatever. And then they like fade out, fade in somewhere else, etc. I don't know, right?
Right. Or they hit like they have to hit like transit stations to go anywhere. Like they can't like go out of their neighborhood or like off the block that they're on without hopping into like a spot on the block that transports them.
And the way that they could move from place to place, at least in lore, could be aircraft of some kind, or subway, they go underground, or a balloon maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, balloon. jetpacks and balloon's good, you know.
Airships.
You go to the balloon stand.
The lore part of that is that you could never make anything that is not real, I guess, right? Like, could I make a teleportation machine and let them use that, or like let them have a memory of a superpower that lets them do whatever, you know?
Yeah, I mean, you could make it. The question is, would they use it? Because their base culture is like, you know, you're a citizen in a real city called native.
Yeah.
You know.
Right. Well,
I don't know.
see what happens.
I mean, literally, like that's the exact kind of thing, like emergent behavior. Like, you know, okay, so say you download the Passport app and you like launch cocaine. You know, like what happens? I don't know.
Yeah.
What should happen? I don't want to prescribe that. You know.
Right. Yeah. Who goes to jail? You know.
Yeah. Yeah.
What is jail? What is that?
Productivity decreased.
Yeah, it's like you go to claim your clanker fees and you make like $600 off $ cocaine. Like, is that drug dealing? I don't know.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, you go to jail and then you go. Then all the fees go to native instead. You know.
Yeah,
the
legit.
native government.
I mean, that's basically what happens now, right? Like, when Bitcoin gets confiscated, it just goes to the reserve now.
Yeah. Basically.
This stuff right here that you're on is a deep dive into some of the stuff on Boot Boys. That is, it's exhaustive to go into, but I think it warrants at least a little bit of talking points on. And I guess if you click on that link right there, and for those that aren't really familiar with Boot Boys, you know, they are actually like a merch art design, you know, retrospective, and what they're doing here is kind of highlighting how similar the Matrix is, and how we are always trying to simulate what is represented in the real world in other spaces here. And this book right here that Neo puts the drive in is simulation and
Simulacrum.
Yeah, simulacra. And it's just it's a little trippy when you kind of like peel back the layers of what a simulation theory is at its core, and how we kind of, you know, we teeter that line of kind of going in that projection. And I think Native kind of, you know, for better kind of is helping us in that direction, or at least it is another platform to kind of express our creative output in a simulation.
Yep.
And some of this kind of quote right here basically talks about how a cartographer's guild, or people that are making maps, right? They'll eventually get to such level of precision that the map is as physically large as the real world. And if we think about what we're doing in the digital space, we can actually create those maps at that scale that don't take up as much space as an entire New York City or anything like that. So it's a little bit more abstract deep dive into it, but I think there's a lot there that we should explore when given time. But yeah.
I'd go one step further. Like, because of the digital world, maps that we can create can actually contain more information than the physical space represented, right? Like, you think about layers, you know, like I can turn on weather or terrain or elevation or population or transit or whatever on a single, you know, kind of frame of UI. I think that's really interesting. And yeah, I mean, obviously Native is kind of matrix coded, you know, and I'm okay being the architect. So like, I think that's pretty cool to think about.
Yeah.
I think that wraps us in terms of like stuff that we had planned, but is there anything that we didn't touch on that you want to touch on? I know next week we're going to start playing gently with colors We're going to be starting to look at some possibles for fonts. Not really like selections at all. I don't like to. It makes it, I think, the weight too heavy when people come in being like, oh, font's getting selected, or like, oh, logos getting selected. But we're just starting to play with these things and start to firm them up. Yeah, I mean, sort of like we did with Clanker, just playing with some loose ideas, some bootlegs of other logos, some explorations that could be hand sketches, that could be in Illustrator, that could be in Figma, and just kind of compiling all that and seeing where we can start connecting the dots and circling things and crossing things out and seeing where the gut is taking us and what's coming out of the fog. So that's really it. These last two meetings have set us up to push there and start working on that. So
very, very cool. So as long as you guys have what you need, then I'm good to go. So community, thanks for coming out. Are there any last thoughts or questions from you all that OpSys should be thinking about? Like they're really Austin and Dan are here to serve all of us, and so would love any last comments or questions that you all have. Otherwise, we can wrap it up shortly.
Yeah, I'm guessing if anybody reaches out afterwards, I guess doing it in the native channel would probably be the best place we can get visibility into it.
Yep, /native fun on Farcaster is 100% the best way, and I'll be sure to tag Dan and Austin if it's relevant to them. And hopefully people found this cool. For sure, Ozone. Thanks for coming out. Maybe a quick pop-up text when transactions happen around dots in the world. Yeah, there's definitely going to be a lot of kind of information design on top of the UI that we're not even thinking about right now. Right now, this is the overall brand system and stuff like that, but there's absolutely a lot of information and product design that needs to be done.
Yeah, and I guess while other people are maybe thinking about questions, this is our first time building in public to this degree, so we're just thankful that you guys are sticking around for this if you are and watching in the future. And if you have any comments on anything, just feel free to drop me a line or Austin a line on Workcast at Frag and at Flood.
Yep. I think overall this was good. I think overall it was really good, especially for midday. I think we had an average, I'd say like 15 concurrent viewers, something like that.
Nice. People doing it on their lunch, hopefully.
Yep. People would average view duration for folks was over 15 minutes, so people would sit and watch 15 minutes instead of popping off. I think I've done streams like that before, and that's pretty good. So nice. People find it interesting, and of course we're gonna release this on YouTube it'll be in the live section, I think, and we've also been streaming on Twitch. I haven't checked the Twitch chat, but I assume there's no one over there. But
Twitch chat, but I assume there's no one over there. That's where we were.
Yeah.
I assume there's no one over there.
Oh no, I've okay. I had like the echo effect. Thank you for the time zone arrangement for the European side. It's 11:30 p.m. there. Happy to attend. Very cool. Nice. Native is indeed global. So, to our neighbors in Asia, sorry for the time, but we're based in the Eastern United States. So, Dan, Austin, always great. If you need anything else from me, let me know. You know how to get a hold of me. So
this was fantastic, really, and I think we are in pretty good alignment based off of what you had from your general mood board and what we've kind of compiled.
Yep.
And like we kind of pointed out at the beginning, it does seem like we naturally gravitate to some monochromatic or some RGB kind of coloring and stuff like that. And
Yep.
I know green is pretty near and dear to some people in the community, so we'll see if we can kind of, keep a nod to that around. It's too soon to tell where everything's going to go, but I'm really stoked to see where everything shakes out, especially next session.
Obviously, and you guys are the experts here. I'd love to explore options that both include green, don't include green. Like I said, this is an open slate. So, but
Beautiful.
You guys do you. That's what you're here for.
Yeah, this is kind of where like the more detailed input will end, right? Like you'll be able to come in and give a review, and yeah, it'll be nice. I think hopefully these meets will get a little bit shorter for a little while at least. And,
Sure.
We don't love spending time with you and the community, but yeah, we realize that it's a lot of time invested. So yeah, it's time to put boots on the ground and start being creative. So appreciate it, man.
Yeah, 100%. And I'll ping you offline about the second part of the contractual stuff. I knew we were waiting on the Safe Wallet stuff to shake out. So I'll ping you separately on that, and then we can also discuss format for the subsequent review sessions. Like, do we want that live streamed? Do we want it video recording, etc.? We can talk about that kind of offline. So.
Yeah, I think it's probably a mix, and we'll just kind of size it to fit when it makes sense.
Yep.
Cool. Sweet.
Shout out Safe Wallet.
Yeah, shout out Safe Wallet.
Yeah, thank the Lord.
Yeah. All right, guys. We'll see you.
Take care.
Later.
Later.
Bye.